Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Story Corner Adventures. We're continuing in The Wheel on the School by Meindert Dejong, and we are now on chapter 9. Now at the end of chapter 8 we had a few unanswered questions, the same questions that Lena had. She had run into town looking for help and could not find any sign of the teacher, could not find any sign even of old Janus, who usually was in his backyard throwing stones at boys and birds, and there wasn't even a rope to pull the bell to ring it. So we are not sure what happened here. We do know from some discussion that we had heard from the ladies in town that Janus had been seen with a bunch of boys pushing him. Janus's granddaughter did not believe that could possibly be true. So in chapter 9 we're going to kind of replay that scene, but this time we're going to be replaying it from the point of view of the boys, the teacher, and Janus. Here we go, chapter 9, The Wheel Rim. When the soaked Ilka and the dripping Jelle arrived in Shora, they hurried down the street to bring their load of wheel spokes and rim sections to the school. "I don't know if anybody in Shora has a rake. Do you?" Ilka asked doubtfully. "With no trees and hardly any yards, there's nothing to rake in Shora." "The teacher might have one," Jelle said. "He's got a little garden." The words stopped in his mouth, and he nudged Ilka. There stood Pier and Dirk in the open gateway of Janus's backyard, talking to Janus. "Look at that," Jelle said in an unbelieving whisper. "Something's up," Ilka said, and hurried right into Janus's yard. Now he too stood in the gateway, talking and talking, explaining everything to Pier, Dirk, and Janus. Jelle stayed in the street, but Ilka mentioned him to Janus. "Jelle, come on," he yelled. "Janus wants to see those rim sections." Jelle did not move. Janus wheeled himself to the gate. "Come on, kid, I don't bite." "No," Jelle said doubtfully, "but you hit awfully hard." "Oh, that's right. You're the big kid I spanked good last year," Janus said. Out of the side of his mouth, he said to the three boys around him, "Maybe I did do it a bit hard if he remembered it a whole year." With everybody looking at him, waiting for him, Jelle had to come. He came, but over his loaded arm, he kept warily looking at Janus and was ready to turn and run like a hare if he had to. Jelle suspected some trap. It wasn't right. Janus sitting there talking to kids. Something must be going to break loose in a minute. Janus just wanted to see if those pieces of rim can be fitted and glued together again, Ilka explained reassuringly. Jelle stepped up, dumped the whole load of rim sections before Janus's chair, and hastily stepped back out of reach. Janus had made no attempt at all to grab him. Instead, he rummaged among the rim sections that Jelle had put before him. He sorted and fitted, trying to fit the different pieces together the way they'd been originally. The other boys stood, absorbed. "Is Janus going to fix it for us?" Jelle whispered. He couldn't believe it. Janus heard him. "It can be done," he told Jelle, "but it'll take time. Some glue, a few screws, and some small nails. Storks aren't too fussy." "But it won't stay without an iron rim to hold it together, will it?" Jelle asked. He forgot his fear now that it seemed there was a possibility the wheel could be put together again. He crowded in close between Dirk and Pier to see just what Janus was doing with the pieces. Janus dropped the sections he was holding so suddenly Jelle jumped back, but Janus just said, "Right you are, kid. You got something besides beef above your neck. This is wasting time. Come on, let's go get that rim." "We'll need a long rake to drag the canal. The mud is so deep," Ilka told him. "A rake," Janus considered. "Now, who in Shora would have a rake? They use that on land, don't they?" It was a joke, but nobody but Pier seemed to feel enough at ease with Janus to laugh. Peter snickered out loud, but when he saw he was laughing alone, he sobered and said, "The teacher's got one, Janus. I know, I had to help him with his garden once, for punishment instead of staying after school." "On to that teacher," Janus commanded. "Come on, let's go." He grabbed the wheels at the side of his chair to propel himself. "On to the school," he bellowed. He seemed to be full of good spirits. "I'll push you, Janus," Peter offered. "I will too," Dirk said. Ilka hastily piled his spokes beside Yella's scattered rim sections and jumped to help with Janus's wheelchair. "May I, Janus? Janus, may I push you?" "Let's see." Janus studied the floor as if it were a deep problem. Then he pointed to Yella. "You, big fellow, you push. Maybe if you do something for me, you won't be so scared of me." With Yella behind the chair, they started off down the street to the school. But the other three boys couldn't keep their hands off. The strange wheelchair was too fascinating. They started off sedately enough, but with all four pushing, Yella and Peer from behind, Dirk and Ilka at the sides, they were soon going at a half run. The wheelchair went bouncing and jouncing all over the irregular street. Janus had to hang on with all his strength, but he seemed to like it. And since he didn't object, the boys went still faster. Now they were almost at a full run. "Yippee!" Janus yelled out ahead to the empty street. "Out of the way, all you mortals! Janus is coming!" The boys shoved still harder. "Boys, this is it! This is making the old wheelchair go! Never knew it could go so fast!" Janus was quiet a moment. "Hey, Peer!" he yelled over his shoulder. "This is almost as much excitement as when that shark bit off my legs." Yelling and laughing, with the wheelchair rattling, they arrived at the school. The teacher came running from the classroom at the strange sounds outside. By the time he reached the door, the boys had already shoved Janus and the wheelchair into the school portal. The teacher and Janus met each other full tilt. It was almost a collision. "Is something wrong?" the startled teacher asked. "What's happened?" "What's happened, teacher, is that these kids found a wheel, but then promptly went and lost the rim in the canal. But they say you own a rake, so we've come to borrow it to drag the canal." "It fell apart," Ilka explained. Then they were all explaining together. The confused teacher finally held up his hand. What I get out of this is that you need a rake, so I'll get my rake from home. Then we'll all go to the canal and you can explain it all on the way." He skirted the group and rushed out of the door. "I think I like that man," Janus observed. "Never had much to do with high-minded teachers since I was a kid, but he means business. I thought teachers just talked, but he doesn't fool around with the words. He goes and does things." The boys wheeled Janus's chair around to push him out of the portal again. At that moment, Janus saw the bell rope hanging in the portal. "Hey, a rope," he said. "I should have thought of it. We need a rope. That bottom mud in the old canal goes so deep in places we may have to tie a rope to the end of the rake." He grabbed at it. "Hey, don't!" Peer warned. "That'll ring the bell and then everybody will come, because if the bell rings, that means a wheel has been found." "Well, a wheel has been found, hasn't it?" Janus said impatiently. "At least 9/10 of a wheel. But don't worry, if I yank that rope with a good enough snap, something will give without ringing the bell." He reached up and gave the rope a tremendous snapping jerk. The rope parted somewhere above in the cupola and came tumbling down around Janus's head. "There," he said. "Now we've got a rope." He proceeded calmly to coil it around his arm. Janus just did things. He hadn't even asked the teacher's permission. The boys looked at him in awe and stared up at the empty hole in the portal ceiling through which the bell rope had always hung. "No wonder you could hardly walk for a week," Ilka whispered to Yella and tenderly rubbed the seat of his own pants as if feeling the pain. The teacher appeared in the portal doorway. He had the rake, but right away he missed the bell rope. He stared at the empty rope hole in the ceiling. "Figured we might need a rope, too," Janus explained. "Oh, I see, the teacher said faintly. Oh, yes. Well, are we ready? Janus asked. Then let's get going. Outside, he took the rake from the teacher and laid it across his lap. Seeing I'm riding, he explained with a grin. Say, he added, maybe you'd better tie this rope around my chest and the back of the chair so I won't go flying out on my face the way these crazy kids take me down the street. The teacher, following his instructions, wound the rope tightly around Janus's chest and bound him to the back of the chair. Can you run? Janus asked the teacher. Because we really move. The four boys giggled. The teacher was a dignified, important person, and Janus asked him to run. To their amazement, the teacher grinned. Well, he said, I should be able to keep up with a wheelchair, and if I can't, you and I had better change places. Janus liked that. He bellowed a big laugh. You're all right, he told the teacher approvingly. But the wheelchair was moving too sedately for him. He looked around. Well, you kids, what's the matter? Just because the teacher's here, you'd think I was a delicate baby in a pram. Get going, get the lead out of your pants. With a doubtful look at their teacher, the boys shoved a little harder. When the teacher still made no objection, they increased the speed. Now they actually had the teacher running beside the wheelchair at a half run. He still looked good-natured about it. Here we go, Yellow warned the others out of the side of his mouth. Look out, you mortals in Shora! He yelled out in imitation of Janus. Janus leaned eagerly forward against his rope, ready. The boys shoved him ahead with all their might. Now they tore down the Shora street at full speed. They went at such a pace that Dirk and Pierre at the sides had all they could do to steady the bouncing, jumping wheelchair. But Janus was shouting things at some woman they passed. Do you remember what it was? The woman told us earlier. Just out of Shora, Ilka had to fall out. The pace was too much for him. But he couldn't stand being left either. He came trotting on behind. All out of breath, except Janus, they arrived at the spot in the canal where the rim had gone down. Janus was all for starting to fish for the rim at once, but the teacher protested, Hey, remember, we ran all the way. Now we've got to do a little breathing, he said. Wait till we catch our breaths. Mine's still back there in Shora. Breathe all you like, Janus said generously. I'll study the situation meanwhile. He propelled himself in the wheelchair so close to the canal's edge that the alarmed teacher, who had sunk down in the grass, jumped up again to hold the chair back. Yella hurriedly grabbed one of the wheels. Dirk and Pierre took the other. Now Ilka came puffing up. He too took hold of the wheelchair. Unconcerned with all the stir and worry, Janus began dragging with the rake. With everybody hanging onto the chair, he leaned against the rope and reached out as far as he could. After his 10th cast with the rake, he began to look doubtful. That mud must be bottomless here. I don't know, teacher, but it looks to me like you'd better send a telegram to China. Have you guys seen a wagon wheel rim down there? None of the boys laughed. They stared somberly into the canal. Ilka came up from behind the chair and peered along the canal. Hey, there's the hub out there, tight against the bank. He pointed out the hub to Janus. You'll need the rake to get that out too, Janus said as he threw the rake out again. At the very next cast, the rake struck something hard. Janus worked furiously, probing the spot, trying to get the rake to take hold of whatever it had hit. Got it, he said at last. But what the rake brought to the surface was only an old enameled pail full of mud. In his disgust, Janus hauled it up by the end of the rake and flung it far. At least that's out of our way. He turned to Ilka. Here, kid, he said. Go get that hub first. We've got to try something different. Let me do it, Ilka, the teacher said, taking the rake. I've been feeling so useless here. He hurried down the canal. The boys pulled the chair back from the canal's edge. Janus prepared the rope. We'll try it with the rope tied to the rake as soon as he gets back. We're going to have to go really deep. And if that rope is long enough, I'm going to get that rim out. Ought to find it with the rake on the end of a rope. Going to find it. Man, I haven't had so much fun since that shark bit off my legs. He looked blandly at Dirk and Pier. Janus's mouth fell open. Ilka stared at Janus. Both legs in just one bite? He asked in awe. Janus shrugged. Am I supposed to know how many bites? He asked. I wasn't looking around just then. What did you do? Yella said. I kicked his teeth out, that's what I did. Pier was enjoying the solemn awe of Yella and Ilka. He couldn't resist. But he'd bitten off both your legs, you said. He pointed out to Janus. Did I say both at one time? Janus said and glared fiercely at Pier. He was still sawing away on one tough old sea boot, so I kicked him in the teeth with the other. That's where I made my mistake. It made him so mad, he just bit off the other. Then I couldn't kick him again, having no more legs left. I hope those sea boots gave that shark a stomach ache, worse than green cherries, Pier said, looking solemnly around at all the others. Me too, Yella said fervently. Ilka stood, dithering, mouthing a question he badly wanted to ask Janus about the shark. But Janus saw the teacher coming back with the hub. At once he had to be pushed back to the canal and became too busy for questions. He tied the rope to the rake handle, threw the rake far out into the canal and let it sink. Slowly he dragged in the rope. Suddenly the rake caught. Now then, Janus said, hang on to the chair. That's the rim, and now it's coming up here to me, or my name isn't Janus. His enormous arms swelled and quivered with the strain. He began to draw the rope and rake and whatever load hung on it toward the canal bank. It was such a tug that the cords in his straining neck swelled and his arms bulged. Suddenly, something snapped. They had all been straining so hard to hold the wheelchair back, they jerked Janus and the chair far back from the bank before they could regain their balance. The rake handle, still tied to the rope in Janus's hands, floated on the surface of the water. Well, there went Shora's only rake, Janus said gloomily. No one else said a word. All stared in dismay at the rake handle in the canal. Well, now we're just going to have to figure out something else, Janus said. He sounded almost too cheerful about it. Let's get back to Shora. I'll rig up something, some way. No one said a word. In the heavy silence, Janus jerked his head up. Did you hear that? He held his hand up for silence. It came again, the sound that only Janus had heard. The wind brought it along the canal. It sounded like screaming, like women screaming. It sounded as if the wind was bringing it from the dike at the far side of the village. Again, the wind picked up the sound. It whisked by their ears along the quiet canal. Janus grabbed the wheels of his chair and whirled the chair around. Those are women! Something's wrong! His eyes shot to the weather vane on top of the tower and then to the sun in a quick estimate of time and wind direction. Ah, he said, the tide's in. Most likely some sheep strayed down the dike and got themselves flooded in the tide and now are standing there just like sheep, letting themselves drown. Let's go. We'll get the rim later. They jumped to push Janus to the road, but as they did so, Janus once more held up his hand for silence. Listen, he said. For a moment there was no sound. Then there came a faint clanging and jingling, but it came from the opposite direction of the screams. Oh, it's only the Tin Man's wagon, Yella said at last. They shoved Janus into the road. Hold it, he said. Wait for the wagon. It'll get us to the women a lot quicker than we can get there on foot. Down the canal road, the horse and wagon came, around a bend and over the bridge in full gallop. The pots and pans danced and jangled, clattered and banged. Hey, look, Pier said. Isn't that Auka on the seat? He's standing up. He looks as if he's yelling at us. Oh, remember Auka? He was coming back with the Tin Man's wagon. Let's find out from his point of view what's happening. Auke had been sitting between the Tin Man and his wife on the high seat of the old wagon. The children had settled down in the deep wagon box among the pots and pans. The Tin Man had insisted on taking them for a long ride around Shora. The direct route down the dike road from Ness to Shora had been too short for him. Everybody deserved an outing this Saturday, he had insisted. They'd ended up on the canal road on the opposite side of Shora. As they rounded the bend in the road and came over the canal bridge, Auke caught sight of the little group at the canal. "Look!" Auke yelled out. "Something's wrong! Somebody must have drowned! Even Janus is there in the wheelchair!" He jumped up on the seat. "Can this horse run?" he asked anxiously. "He can run that far," the Tin Man said. He slapped the lines hard across the horse's bony back. The old horse lunged ahead. With an insane jangling of tin, the wagon lurched and rattled toward the waiting group at the roadside. That's it for chapter 9. The next chapter is going to be called Wagon in the Sea. I think you might be able to guess which wagon we're talking about and why it may end up in the sea. Do you have an idea? Well, tune in next time and we'll find out when we read chapter 10. Thanks for joining, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye now.